Hi, I'm Jacob Flood, and I beat the often path by building the world's first brain-sensing headphone that powers Fitbit for your brain.
Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On this show, we celebrate unique success stories that help us think outside the box in our lives and careers. Joining me today is Jacob Flood, the founder and CEO of Eno, makers of Enophone headphones that can monitor your brain data just by you wearing them, helping you become more focused and productive and giving you a deeper understanding of how your mind actually works during the day. If you've been working from home, you know how important productivity is, especially when there's no one to keep you on track except yourself. Jacob has spent over 10 years in the mental productivity space, and he's the author of the book Study Smart. Today, Eno has received millions in funding and has shipped their headphones to over 80 countries. So here's Jacob Flood of Eno. All right, welcome to the show, Jacob. And as is customary with all Canadian entrepreneurs, we're going to begin this episode by singing "O Canada." Will you join me?
I will.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land. Like most Americans, I don't know the words to "Oh, Canada."
I only know it in French.
Get out of here. All right, because you're in Montreal, that's why. And now the audience is like, that was the cringiest thing I've ever heard. All right, won't attempt to sing again. We're going to go back to the conversation. Thanks for joining me. So you've built headphones that monitor your brain. And you've had some decent success. You started on Kickstarter. So tell me about the journey that brought you to bringing this product out.
Yeah, so most people know our story, Kickstarter onwards, but it starts about a decade prior. I have been just waist deep in self-improvement, productivity culture, biohacking, nootropics, the whole nine yards. And this was during university. I was really getting into trying to figure out, how can I get better grades, less effort, basically optimizing every minute of every day. And what I discovered was that this whole field runs incredibly deep and has a lot of insight that just about anybody, whether you are, type A entrepreneurial type or you are in any other field of work, can benefit from. But the only real way to get access to it is to read the 1,000 hours of data and studies and books and all that. And so my mission's kind of been for the last decade to try and bring a lot of that to light and share these tools with people so that they can take best use of them and learn how to better engage with whatever it is that they want to be engaging with. And so for me, that started with a tutoring company. I was helping people learn math and science back in university. And what I realized was I was spending more time teaching people to learn than I was actually teaching the math and science. And so that led to a whole rabbit hole of trying to productize that service, right? Building tools that can help people really understand themselves and bring to full attention the kind of science that underlies how they can accomplish those things. I wrote a book on it, ended up building this product, and this is really an extension.
Yeah, talk to me about that book. So when in the process did you write that book?
Probably. So version one of this attempt was I tried to turn that tutoring company into kind of like a SaaS ed tech thing. So I describe it as Khan Academy meets Skype tutoring. The logic being, if you're teaching math and science basically the same way every time with every student in tutoring, why don't you just record that and give it to them as digestible little video tidbit? Yeah, exactly. So we built a platform that had that, and then it had plugins where you could request like little 5 to 10 to 15 minute sessions of tutoring that would be cheaper all around, and you could get, more bang for your buck. And fundamentally, the premise behind that platform was that the reason people were failing their math and science courses was that the content was the problem. Like, people would tell me, well, when you explain it, it makes sense. When my teacher does, it doesn't. And I'm like, great, I must be amazing at this. And so if I just record myself doing this, it'll be perfect. And the reality is that's not the problem. Like, the content wasn't the issue, right? The textbooks weren't not good enough. There was something else there that was preventing people from fully understanding this and getting, amazing grades in math and science. And so the product was a flop. It didn't go anywhere. It landed, like a lead balloon. And so V2 was, I said, okay, if it's not the content, it's got to be something about the process, right? People are digesting the same content from their teachers and going home and then reviewing and practicing and learning and digesting that content differently if you're getting a C's and D's in your class versus if you're getting B's and A's. And so my logic was, let's find out what the science says about the psychology and the neuroscience of learning, of memory consolidation, of how you take in information, break it down into digestible pieces, remember it, and then retrieve it when you want to execute on your work. And just present that as fact in a book and give people the tools that they need in order to be able to overcome whatever they might be struggling with. And again, the premise of V2 was, if it's not content that's the problem, it must be information. They must just not know how to study properly at some level. And so spent the 2 years in university, wrote a book on the psychology of learning, published it on Amazon, and I got good feedback on it. People read the book. They said, wow, there's a lot of information in here that's really, interesting. It's super useful and it really helps me understand. I'm like, great. And then 6 months later, you go back to that same friend. You're like, so like, how was your grades, like studying going? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. I'm like, cool. Did you learn anything from the book? They're like, oh no, I haven't done anything of what you suggested.
Oh, geez.
Great, thanks, man. And again, it was just a failed premise, right? The idea that people were not getting successful grades was because they didn't understand the science of how to learn was flawed. When you ask most students, like, look, what study habits do you have? They'll list off a dozen different things that they know work, that they've experimented with, that they learned from their profs or from other students or from literature. And then it's that second question of like, oh, well, how often do you do that? And they're like, oh, never. I usually just go home and I read the book and I hope it works.
Yeah.
And so the problem wasn't the information, it's putting it into practice. And really the last 6 years for me of building Eno has been an adventure in that. It's how can we give people tools to take what they know and put it into practice in a way that's going to be more effective.
So having done all of this, I mean, obviously the elephant in the room when you're talking about this is differences in cognitive capacity or capabilities of the individual. To what extent do you believe in that now, having done so much research versus what you might have 10 years ago?
There definitely is a difference. Like, look, I am, as naturally gifted as you could call it in math and science, and my siblings, for example, are not. And no amount of, I think, crazy effort is going to overcome the fact that the premise underlying that is I really like math and science and they don't. And so for every hour they put into it, I'm going to put 10, and therefore I'm going to get better at it. And so there are natural differences in what you're interested in, that those tend to manifest as natural differences in what you're gifted in based on the amount of subconscious time you're spending actually engaging with that topic. But I do believe that almost all of us have at some point something that we want to do that we're like, if only I was just a little bit better at it, or a little bit more organized, or a little bit more effective, or more consistent, or any flavor of that criticism. If only I could overcome that mental barrier, I would be able to do X or Y, and that's what I really want to do. And those mental barriers are at some level fictitious. They are the manifestation of our inability to say, I want to do X, and then engage with the vast array of neuroscience that's required to get your brain and body to do X. And I think that overcoming that is something that we can all train ourselves to do.
I think a lot of people can recognize the thought patterns that brought you there, but how did you specifically land on a product, and how did you land on this product as being the next part of that journey?
Yeah. So where we left off, I'd written the book. I'd realized, I gave it to a bunch of people. They read it, they appreciated it, and they put zero into practice. And so I started looking up some of the science of habit forming. The logic being, if somebody learns something and they're like, okay, this is the thing that's good for me, brushing my teeth twice a day. What are the steps to take that from a fact, a piece of information that you know, to a habit that you're engaging with on a regular basis that is actually going to be impactful in your life? And there's a lot of really good research about how to create those self-reinforcing habits over long periods of time. BJ Fogg is one of the premier researchers in this area. And he came up with a model, I believe he calls it BMAP. Behavior is motivation times ability times prompt. And the logic there is that if you have the motivation to do something, you actually want to do it deeply in your soul, and you have the ability to do it, then often what lacks is the prompt. You have to remember to do it. It's got to occur to you randomly during the day that, oh yeah, I should do this thing, at the same time as you have the motivation to do it and the ability to do it, for that behavior to actually get done. And so I was looking at other fields that had done this well and looking for a proxy of a product that has managed to get people to engage in repeated behaviors that stick, that don't dissipate after a week, like, the memory of the test studying. And where I landed was Fitbit. My current partner lost like 80 pounds using their Fitbit. Cool. And they attribute the success to that because they said basically having a physical manifestation of this desire to get fit that lives on your wrist, that speaks to you during the day, that reminds you of the thing that you're going to be doing, and that quantifies it to increase the motivation to succeed, that unlocks for a lot of people that ability to create the habit of being more healthy. And the logic for us just felt so clear is, if we have a Fitbit for our physical health, and we have an Oura Ring for our sleep health, and we have a Whoop Band for our athletic health, why is there no Fitbit for mental fitness, for mental health, for the ability to build, productive, safe, healthy work habits? That isn't physical, that is more cognitive in nature. And so our goal was like, look, can we build a Fitbit for your brain? Something that's going to help you engage in these habits at a cognitive level that Fitbit's kind of mastered at a physical level.
So you wanted to make a Fitbit for the mind. That's a pretty lofty goal. How do you begin that process? Where does that start?
It's messy. The start is always very, very messy. And so our logic was like, look, we need to learn everything we can about this field, right? We need to become experts in this whole Fitbit for your brain category. And so that means understanding what everybody else is doing and what works and what doesn't. It means fundamentally answering the question of, is this technologically possible? Figuring out what the actual go-to-market and the business plan and the financials and all the rest of the businessy stuff is going to look like, and then getting a prototype to see if this would actually work and trying to test it with customers. And so for us, where we started was a program called Next Canada. They have a Next 36 program that helps incubate entrepreneurs and figure out answers to some of those questions. And throughout that program, we started talking to neuroscience researchers and other neurotechnology founders and testing out all of these products and going to meetups with other neurotech builders and hackers, right? There's an incredible community called NeurotechX that was really helpful in getting us started on this kind of journey of discovery of the neurotech field. And so, 6 months of that, of just messing around in the dirt, figuring out what is possible, validating our idea and testing the pitch with dozens of people every day, led us to, by the end of 2016, to have a pretty good sense for the fact that this technologically can absolutely be done. It was just a question of solving the design and engineering problems with it, not overcoming some sort of technological barrier. And secondly, that when you describe this pitch to people of like, you sit down at your day, at your desk in early morning and you're like, today's going to be awesome. I'm going to get everything done. And then you check your email and you get a Slack post and your phone vibrates and then you have a quick meeting and then coworker interrupts you. And then you're like, wow, it's been 4 hours and like I've gotten nothing done.
Yeah.
When you tell that to people, their eyes light up and they go, oh my God, that's every day for me. Like I feel that in my soul. That emotion to us was the clinch. It was, okay, people want this. They need this in their life in a way that I think we didn't fully understand until we really talked to the consumer.
That's awesome. But yes, especially now in the Zoom world, the post-pandemic world, the remote work world, so many pings and bleeps and things distracting us every second of every day. Obviously, the ability to have meaningful, unbroken focus is more important than ever. So
it's everything. It's
everything. Yeah, especially for people trying to advance themselves.
Nowadays, if you're working from home, you are essentially mandated to become a productivity expert in a way that you didn't have to before, right?
That's an excellent thought. Yeah, you're right.
If you were at the office, you can show up and there is a social and designed pressure that will push you in the direction of getting your work done.
Yep.
That doesn't exist at home. You all of a sudden need to be cognitively, we use the term mentally fit enough to decide to focus on a boring spreadsheet instead of the 1,000 other things that you could be doing that are more interesting. And that requires practice. It requires training. And it requires understanding of even just the science of how you're going to be able to put yourself in a perspective that you'll desire that. And some people naturally have that, or they naturally have an anxiety that pushes them towards that. Ultimately, both are, fantastic tools for getting focus done. But for the rest of us, it takes practice. And we're in a world right now where if you are working from home, you are basically responsible for becoming an expert in designing your own cognitive life. And that's not easy. And I think it's worth giving credit to the fact that it's not a simple task to train yourself to be able to do these kinds of boring things during the day that are required to build anything meaningful.
And that's a perfect segue into the next question, which is the tech as it stands today, the Enophone as it stands today. How does that help? What does it do? And what can I expect if I start bringing that into my life?
Yeah, so I haven't even given the description of what it is. So Enophone is
there will be an intro, by the way. The audience will have heard an intro.
Cool.
That's like, who is this guy? Why is he here? No, but please continue.
Yeah. Because like again, I have a tendency to do that. I jump right in the weeds. I love the messy middle part of it, and then people will be like, "But what do you do again?" And I'm like, "Okay,
I am a shoe salesman."
Yeah. Exactly, best shoes for focus you'll ever have.
Awesome.
So it's a brain sensing headphone. It's essentially Fitbit for your brain, right? It allows you to understand your level of mental effort and readiness and efficiency. Those are 3 metrics that we've defined that globally give you a better sense of your productivity and your mental health. And so what the product does at a fundamental level is anytime you put it on, it's a noise canceling headphone. It helps you create a good environment. You can listen to your own music, or we have focus music built into the app that is designed for focus and it's customized to your brain. And then you do your work, you do whatever needs to get done. And anytime you're wearing the headset, you're going to be getting data about your level of productivity and mental health, both about what's happening to you in your brain, and also we monitor what apps you're using so you can correlate the two. You can see when I'm on Microsoft Word, I'm getting X amount of focus. When I'm on Facebook, maybe it's a little less. And so our goal is to help provide you the data, the insight, and the guidance that you need to be able to become a master of your own productivity and mental health. And so after a day, maybe you'll get some data about when during the day you were focusing and how focused you were and which apps were most interesting. After a week or 2, we could start to extrapolate that over time and tell you, this is the best time of day for you to be engaging in deep focus based on the data that we've seen from you for the last week. And this is how long a session should be before you should probably take a break. And those kinds of insights will help you make decisions about how you are engaging with your time and become a little more deliberate in the way that you're thinking about your productivity.
That's super cool. So if everything goes right, the next 5-10 years, where do you see this tech heading in a positive world? What's the evolution from here?
I think the premise that we started with of Fitbit for your brain is fundamentally where we want to head. So the way I explain it, if you know nothing about physical fitness, like you can't tell me anything about what exercises are going to help for you, the difference between strength training and cardio, the difference between the different macros you're supposed to be eating, how much sleep you're supposed to get, like this entire physical health bubble of information that takes hours and hours and hours to get up to speed on. If you know nothing about that, you could still go buy a Fitbit and it will give you slowly in a drip feed the kinds of information and learnings and content and everything that you would want to engage with that. And it does it in a way that is inherently habit forming, right? They start you small. It's just about tracking your steps. And they're like, get 10,000 steps. And then you'll get 6,000 and realize like, oh, I thought I was a little more active than that. Maybe I need to walk a little more. And then week 2, week 3, week 4, they'll start to say, well, oh, we also have these workouts that you could try. And you can engage in a 15-minute HIIT training, and that will give you these benefits. And you're like, oh, cool. And then a month later, they're like, oh, we also have this food tracking that you can use to understand what the macro breakdown of your meals looks like. And we have this sleep tracking, and we have this subscription content and this platform where you can connect with other users. And all of a sudden, a year later, if you choose to engage with this at its full depth, you could be a full physical health expert. And you could understand this at a depth that you never would have if you decided instead to start reading literature reviews and actually going into the science of it, because the reality is that stuff's messy in a way that is very difficult to parse. We want to be the same platform for your mental and cognitive health. And so if you want to learn more about the science of productivity, it starts very tiny. We just tell you, look, wear this headset whenever you want to focus, and we will show you how many focus minutes you're actually engaging in during the day, which is a fun starting point, because a lot of people are like, no, I focus like at least 6 hours of my 8. And you're prove it.
6 minutes?
And
how
then
many?
They put on the headset. They put on the headset, and just in terms of their actions, not even in terms of what the brain data is saying, just their actions, they will go through a week of this and they'll realize that they decided deliberately, I want to engage in focused work an hour and a half a day. And you're like, ooh, That's insightful. You thought it was 8 hours, but really in that 8 hours, you're doing 6.5 hours of a little bit of everything, your emails, you're checking up on Slack, your meetings, whatever it may be, and only an hour and a half of actually deep, focused, productive work. And so the question is then like, well, A, how do I increase that? And B, how do I make sure that that hour and a half is the best hour and a half you could possibly have? Because if that's all I'm getting, it better be amazing. And so then we start giving you a little bit more data, a little bit more content, a little bit more information. And the goal ultimately is that in 5 years, if you're buying this product, regardless of what the headset looks like, regardless of the form factor, it's something that you could start with and that will slowly but surely teach you to understand the science of productivity. So that 6 months in, you are an expert in how to organize your time and your day, what your data says about you and your habits and how that differentiates you from everybody else, how to optimize both for productivity and for work-life balance and mental health in the same conversation, how to organize what tasks you're doing and when you're doing them. And this whole world of science that is very, very deep and developed, that hopefully you can start to gradually gain insight into so that you can take that with you wherever you go.
It's a fabulous concept. It's very easy to understand with the Fitbit example. I think in a positive sense, and this is where one of the great debates of our time right now, right now, where all of these bosses and these CEOs, they want everybody to come back to the office. I'll use this as an example. And of course, people who've gotten used to remote work and like it they don't want to go back. And there's many different sides to this, such as if we don't commute, then the pollution is lower, which is good. Less cars on the road is better for all of us, for the pollution and for the climate. So if I don't have to commute 2 hours each way to work, I think of that as a positive. The boss wants me in the office so that they know how much I'm working. Now, again, I said I've been doing remote work for over 10 years at this point, and what I noticed is sometimes I would go into an office for a day, and I always felt like I got way less done in an office environment than I ever do on a typical day, simply because there's so much chit-chat, there's breaks, there's lunch breaks, there's all this gossip, there's so many layers in an office that prevent you, in my opinion, from doing that kind of focused work where you say, I'm just going to sit down and bang something out for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So question number one is, how many hours, and this is the great debate right now, how many hours does somebody actually work in an office or remote in an 8-hour workday? That's part of this. But then the other question is, how can an employer or somebody who's in a position of power use technology like this to monitor, track, and control somebody that they want that data on? Is there a negative side of this type of technology if it gets into the wrong hands or if it's linked to the wrong system? We already have time tracker systems where say, I'm going to look at your screen and take a screenshot every 15 minutes randomly to make sure you're still working. Do you foresee this kind of tech finding its way into systems like that?
I'm going to dive into that second one first because I think it's really interesting. So we, the moment COVID kicked off, actually, what we did, we have about 5,000 people using our product in the wild that we've shipped. And we messaged a lot of them and said like, hey man, I want to learn what you're thinking right now. And in our breakdown of our customers, the vast majority are what you would traditionally call employees. They are knowledge workers. They're the designers, marketers, engineers, coders, whatever you will. And then about 20% of the top is managers and execs who spend more time managing a team than they do actually doing their own work. And so we talked to the managers and we're like, look, what are you currently thinking about? And it was interesting to hear that the vast majority described to us, they're like, look, I'm talking to my team. I'm trying to help them with everything. And what I'm hearing from them is that they are burnt out, that they're struggling, that they're trying to figure out how to balance, this strange new world of work from home and the COVID stress and their own work. They're overworking. That one we heard a lot. The average number of hours in a day went from 8 to about 12 when COVID first struck because everyone's at home working all the time. And they were saying, look, I want to help my team. I just don't know how. And I actually see a lot of the overcompensation with time tracking software as being that. Fundamentally, employers, I am an employer myself, but I don't speak on behalf of everybody. But what they were telling to us was that they want to help their team be productive. They want to help them figure out their work-life balance and navigate the complexities of essentially becoming a productivity expert in their own home. They don't know how. Because at the same time as trying to be a manager and understand the intricacies of your business model, manage your team, figure out your KPIs and your expectations, like their job has a lot of time commitments. Do we expect them to become experts in the science of productivity the same way that we expect employees to do so? It is wild, the fact that we're just assuming that everyone's going to be an expert in all of these topics and understand the deep neuroscience of how these things are structured without ever actually giving them the tools to do so. And so what we found was that the vast majority of employers, when presented with a solution like ours that says, look, give this to your team, we're not going to give you any data about it. Like, this is going to be for your employees, from your employees, by your employees. And they're going to use it for themselves to learn about how they can structure their time better, how they can improve themselves. And it's going to basically be a tool that is volitional. Because, fundamentally, a headphone, you can take it off whenever you want. Yeah. And then you just use your AirPods and everyone's happy. Right. If you give your employees this and you tell them that you're not tracking anything, do you think they'll use it? And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like, our employees are desperate for something that will help them understand how to be more effective and how to figure out, how to maximize their productivity, but still live a happy life. And so I think that this trend right now is very short-lived. And I'm hoping it's short-lived, because I think it's a little bit of an overcompensation from anxious managers who don't know how to figure out how to organize a team that will be as productive as possible, and that are grasping for solutions. And these software companies that say we're going to track every mouse click popped up and basically said, well, this is the best that the world can offer you right now. And I think that if we can start to offer tools that are a little bit more personal, that are about the individual, not about the data, that we can get to a place where people understand, look, empowering teams is more effective than trying to track them.
On the positive side, you've raised millions in funding so far. You've got another funding round coming up towards the end of this year, if I'm not mistaken. You mentioned 5,000 people actively using the product. I think I saw somewhere that you've shipped this thing to 80 different countries, so people around the world are using it. You've been working on this for some time. We talked about 2016. So how has the feedback been from actual users, especially people who've been using it for a while now, for an extended period of time?
It's been great. I think what we noticed when we first started this was that there's a lot of neurotech devices out there. And fundamentally, what they all lack is this ability to just be seamless, to just feel like you're using another high-tech consumer device built by people who have your best interest in mind for you, and then ignore it, and then not have to engage with it and press 5 buttons and figure out what the data means and interpret it all. It's got to be something that's as simple as putting on a headphone. And so what we noticed was we've been working on our software for the last year, iterating on feedback from our customers. We started shipping in 2020, and so we've had about a year and a half's worth of feedback from different customers. And the average user engagement right now is at an all-time high for us. It's somewhere just north of an hour a day.
Cool.
Which for a consumer electronics device, in particular a neurotech device, is incredible.
Sure.
There's no other platform in neurotech right now where you could get an hour plus a day of brain data recorded so that you could start to understand it, right? Some of our customers have measured 3,000 hours of their neural data using our product. And so it's just incredible when you start projecting what you could start to understand about yourself with that kind of stuff, right? When you imagine something like measuring cognitive decline, one of the big problems in literature right now is when you measure cognitive decline, doing so in a single 5, 10, 15, even an hour-long session is very, very, very difficult, because cognitive decline is a very personal thing. What you want to measure is the trend line. Right. And you just can't do that in a single session. And when you go into a lab and try and set up a clinical EEG to measure what's going on in your brain, it takes 2 hours to set it up. And then you have to do these crazy sessions, and it costs you thousands of dollars, and 2 clinicians need to walk you through it. Like, nobody's going to do that. It's completely inaccessible. Whereas now we have a headphone that you could just listen to music with and all of a sudden get 3,000 hours of your brain data that you could start to analyze. It's amazing. Like, you could start to detect stuff like cognitive decline and Alzheimer's and stroke and concussions and dementia at a granularity that is not possible in the labs. And so I just see such a powerful future for this tech. And the feedback that we've gotten from our audience is, look, I've tried all of these neurotech devices, and this is the first one that feels like something I want to wear. that I want to have 3,000 hours of. And that's really exciting to us. That's what keeps us going.
And I'm sure you have logged yourself probably more than 3,000 hours with your own tech. Has any part of your own life changed? Have you gotten any insights into how your own brain functions that you were surprised to find?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So first thing is I schedule 0 calls 2 to 4 p.m. Cool. That's my rock star zone. Like that is where everything happens. And so my entire day is organized around what the data told me, which is like, man, 2 to 4 p.m., you can't let that go. Like that is when you need to be thriving. So my morning routine has been structured around that. Is I will get up. I have a much more elongated morning routine now. It's about 2.5 hours of slowly getting into my day before I ever start work. Because again, the data told me that I have a much more effective morning if I have a longer morning routine. Then I have that kind of 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. where I schedule all of my meetings. That's the valley of my cognitive effort. The ability to focus is much, much, much lower there. And so that's where I tend to schedule stuff that is naturally invigorating, that doesn't require a lot of cognitive effort to focus, like conversations, right? Then I have my lunch, I have my 2 to 4 p.m. rockstar zone, and then the follow-up at the end of the day, the kind of 4 to 6, 4 to 7, where you can kind of clean up everything, organize your stuff, set the next day in motion, and then the evening. So just from a productivity perspective, my entire day has been changed based on the experiments I was able to run and what the data was telling me about what worked and what didn't there.
That's so cool. And that insight alone is something that I think will have a lot of people salivating just hearing that. They say, hey, that sounds really cool. Just like, nope, 2 to 4, I do not schedule meetings. And also there is something kind of funny about the fact that you schedule all of your meetings during the cognitive valley. That says a lot. I mean, people have mixed feelings about meetings in general, and that's pretty damning. Right? One
of the things that we did notice actually is that you can, so I wear the Enophones often during meetings, and so I can measure my brain while I'm in the meeting. And when you are engaging in these kinds of conversations, it's naturally invigorating, right? So you don't need to be at your best. It will bring the best out of you.
Okay,
because
that's
social pressure of conversation is a great stimulant. And so if you want to be thriving the whole day, you need to take the boring stuff and put it during the best times. And then you take the fun stuff, the engaging stuff, the stuff where you get to actually be with people, and put that during the valleys. And that way you're going to have kind of a little bit of the best of both worlds.
That's so cool. And that's one of those examples of opposites that you sometimes hear. I love those kind of opposite things that go against conventional.
Not intuitive, right?
Yeah, but it makes so much sense. And obviously I experience it because it's just like doing this. I get so invigorated from doing this and from talking with smart people. So now I need to figure out when my valley is, and I'll put this there, and then we'll just go from there.
Exactly. We have another fun one, which was we have a music platform in our app that we built with a team of neuroscientists and musicians, where it's AI generative music. So it creates the soundscapes in real time, and it's all ambient sound. So there's no lyrics to the music. And we were able to parameterize that music in such a way that we can control with a knob the level of intensity or complexity or warmth or brightness. And we can basically create a mood with that music in a very programmable way, a very controllable way. And so what we did was we plugged that into the brain data. And so when you're listening to the music within our app, as your focus starts to go down, we will tweak the knobs of the music to try and figure out what needs to be done to get you back into that zone. And it's a perfect closed loop system that will learn to create the kind of soundscape that you need to be more focused. And so another learning I had was we tested that against a whole bunch of different kinds of focus music and other different kinds of soundscapes. And you imagine there's a kind of common takeaway, which is that music with lyrics tends to be less good for focus, right? And the idea of it was that it was distracting. And you'd imagine that means that your focus levels go down when you're distracted by this music, but the data is the opposite. Your focus level actually goes up. Your level of cognitive mental effort go up, because inherently music with lyrics is emotionally impactful. And what that does is it basically siphons out your energy. You can't not tune into it because it's just so good. It's so emotionally catchy. And that means you're basically wasting cognitive resources on that music. And so when you use music like ours or other good ambient focus music, your mental effort will actually be lower. And that's a good thing, because that means you can put more of that mental effort towards your work. that to me was another kind of startling one where you're like, oh, that feels backwards, that your effort is lower and that's better. But it turns out that's actually exactly what you want.
So cool. Fantastic. And there's somebody I'm going to put you in touch with after this. Adam Hewitt is the founder of Evoked Response, somebody I talked to before. He's been in this space of the generating of music for a long time, so he's more on the music side of Focus. So I'm definitely going to connect you guys after this because there could be some really interesting synergy there because you have a product. And
we're already in touch with Adam. I love the guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, there's too much similarity there, but that's awesome. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you, sir. We're at the end of our hour here. Very cool how your life has progressed. Very cool the thoughts and the wavelength that you're on now is awesome. So congrats on figuring this out for yourself and congrats on the early success that you've had and the funding to date and the positive feedback. All very cool stuff. I predict a very bright future for you in the coming 5 to 10 years. So I look forward to staying in touch. But as we wrap up this episode, can you give us a final word or promote whatever you'd like to promote here?
Nothing particular to promote, but check out Enophone. It's the coolest thing we've ever built. And so you definitely want to head to enophone.com and see what we're doing there. Actually, I guess I should promote. I think we're having a back to school promotion right now. So, my marketing team would get angry if I didn't do that. But take a look. It's awesome. And then otherwise, I'm Jacob Flood. You could reach me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Twitter, @jfloodsays, I think is my handle.
All right. Sounds good. I really appreciate your time. And with that, the official podcast is over. Over.